Our fictional story today is a heroic tale set during World War I, a story of courage in the face of the impossible. Silence over the Swamp of Tears. In the summer of 1915, the Flanders region of Belgium had been transformed into muddy swamps and a graveyard for thousands of soldiers. British soldiers called it the Swamp of Tears, because of the mud that swallowed men and equipment, and the incessant rain. In this hell, the British Royal Rifles Battalion was trapped. Their supply lines were cut, ammunition was running out, and the wounded suffered in silence. Among these men was Private Thomas Faust, a field reporter before the war, known for his keen eyes and quiet courage. He was not a fighter by nature, but he had proven his worth in many dangerous situations. His mission now was the most desperate, to find a way to send an urgent distress call before it was too late. The nearest Allied contact point was 10 miles away across no man's land, an open and exposed area controlled by German machine guns. Going across it was certain suicide. But there were no other options. Thomas possessed a special skill he had learned in his youth while roaming the forests of Yorkshire, the ability to move in complete silence and blend with the environment even in the most difficult circumstances. Disguised as a killed German soldier, with a carefully folded distress message in his inner pocket, Thomas set out under the cloak of darkness. The ground was horrific, shell craters were lakes of mud, barbed wire was like a twisted labyrinth, and scattered corpses reminded him of the high price of this war. Every step was an adventure. The persistent fog provided some cover, but it also made visibility extremely difficult. Halfway through, as he crawled across a devastated field, he heard sounds. A German patrol. Thomas froze in place, burrowing into the mud, covering himself with dirt and foliage. He held his breath, praying that the enemy soldiers, passing a few meters from him, wouldn't discover him. They passed without noticing him. Thomas continued his crawl. His feet ached, and the cold penetrated his bones, but he knew the lives of his comrades depended on him. With every mile he covered, he imagined the faces of the wounded soldiers in the swamp, and the silence of despair that had begun to settle upon them. These images were his only fuel. Just before dawn, he reached what he believed to be the edge of no man's land. Visibility was still poor due to the fog. Suddenly, he heard another sound. It wasn't the sound of a patrol, but a faint moan. Thomas froze again. He approached slowly, and in the pre-dawn darkness, he saw a young German soldier lying on the ground, severely wounded in his leg, his face pale with pain. Thomas could have ignored him and gone on his way. His mission was paramount. But something in the young soldier's eyes, perhaps the fear and despair he had seen in the eyes of his comrades hours earlier, made him stop. Thomas realized that this soldier, like himself, was just a human caught in this terrible war. Despite the enormous risk, Thomas took out the first aid kit he carried and began to bandage the German soldier's leg. He spoke in a low voice in English, nodding to reassure him. The German soldier noticed Thomas's uniform and understood the situation, but he offered no resistance. The pain had exhausted him, and Thomas's act was a purely human one in a mad world. After finishing the dressing, Thomas signaled the German soldier to remain hidden. Then, without another word, he continued on his way. Light had begun to appear, making his movements more dangerous, but he could not turn back. Finally, after hours of continuous crawling, Thomas saw an abandoned British trench. It was a sign that he had reached the Allied lines. He ran with all his might, ignoring the pain in his feet, until he reached the first guard post. The soldiers were shocked to see a soldier emerge from the Swamp of Tears in this manner. The message was delivered, and reinforcements and supplies reached the Royal Rifles Battalion just in time to save them. Thomas never mentioned his encounter with the wounded German soldier, but this act of humanity, in the heart of the battlefield, was his hidden heroism, surpassing all the courage he showed in his mission. It was a silence louder than all noise, and a symbol of humanity that can manifest even in the harshest conditions. I hope you enjoyed this heroic story.